Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. You know, I've been plagued by going out more and more lately and seeing these stupid little signs that say no guns allowed. It's a good thing I don't carry a Beretta or a revolver. I'm just kidding. I actually comply most of the time. Not because I'm really worried about the establishment finding out, because concealed is concealed. It's more so I usually just don't haunt those places very often. So if I do, I make it a rarity so that I'm not a canned tuna. But I think we're in a place that in the 2A community that we're getting rapidly, if we haven't already been there for a while, where we're not going to obey the rules of law anymore, especially in the 2A community. And what I mean by that is they're consistently trying to infringe on our rights. Doesn't matter what state you're in. Doesn't matter what party you tend to vote for. Look at the Safer Communities Act. That was passed by a bipartisan vote, which lends into another situation that we have to talk about. Magazines, more specifically magazine bans, because every state, including my own, has tried to ban quote-unquote large-capacity magazines. To me, there is no such thing as a large-capacity magazine. A magazine is a magazine. So however many rounds it holds doesn't matter. It's just a magazine. But if you can ban said items, you have set a precedent down that you can't feed the devices that they're trying to actually get rid of. And that doesn't set well with me. It never has. I've never understood why you couldn't have a 30-round magazine, especially after doing a little more research and finding out that there's almost almost a billion. There are 900 plus million of these magazines in circulation. Let me re-say that again. Approximately 900 million of these are just in the United States alone, magazines. Now, that means that it's definitely in common use, so therefore one of the ATF's little checky boxes has to be ticked off, because there's only 327 million people in the United States. So if we almost have 8 billion of them in circulation, that means that they're more in common use than you think. If you do the math behind that, even with the horrific stats they like to give, you're looking at less than 0.1% of crime used or carried out with a magazine that is quote-unquote high capacity. So it doesn't affect crime. What's really, really horrible about this is Washington State was supposedly covered by an injunction for all of 88 minutes. That injunction was filed, and a clerk from the court, not a clerk, what is he, some sort of administrative person anyway, he stayed the magazine ban. So they were going to repeal it, stay it. He stayed the stay of the magazine ban. That's the correct way to say that. So Washington State lost out within 88 minutes. Now, Oregon, a bright spot for us all, I guess, in this regard, their stay actually stayed in place, and you can buy magazines, normal capacity magazines in Oregon right now, as of this taping. But the story, the reason why it stuck to me so much, is I've talked about for months, almost a year probably, about how law-abiding citizens are just getting to the point where they're not going to listen anymore. They're not going to care. Because it doesn't seem like, number one, that this is anywhere near fair. Because if there are over almost 1 billion of these particular devices, feeding devices, in the wild, and there are only 327 million people, that includes men, women, and children in the United States, they're more than in common use. So by your own definition, ATF. In the same vein, the ATF has come out and said, if you engage in the sale of a firearm, and that's how vague it is, you are now required to have an FFL. Okay. So this is a rule that the Justice Department has signed off on. So it's now going to be put in the Federal Registry, and it's going to take 30 days from that day that it goes into, that they mark it in the registry, that it goes into effect, and then it can be enforced. Now, the scary precedent here is that the ATF has a horrible record of enforcement. If they believe you have any are breaking any of these arbitrary rules that the ATF has. If you look at the most recent shooting, I think it was in Arkansas, I believe, or somewhere down south, a gentleman was suspected of selling firearms, not having an FFL. They executed a search warrant in the middle of the night, thus breaking into his house, and he returned fire, or he answered a break into his home with firearms, because, you know, that's what most 2A people would do. And they shot him. You know, go back a little farther, you got Ruby Ridge. Go back a little farther, you have Waco. So the ATF likes to put people in danger because they know there's no real repercussions for them. You know, it's sad that we're in this point right now, and we have been for a long time, and a lot of people are starting to realize it more and more, that the two-tier justice system is just not cutting it anymore, and we need to do something about it. You know, I'm still of that volition that's still a little bit of a statist, I guess, and that I believe in the rule of law, and the rule of law should be followed. However, that if the law is not just or correct, I'm not necessarily pro following it or not following it. And the reason being, what you do is free choice. If something is truly unjust and you feel it's unjust, why should you follow that rule? You know, that's the whole tenet of our country's founding. We have people that have went to war and refused orders because they were unlawful. And if these edicts that they keep pushing out, because, you know, Trump opened the door for this, keep getting pushed out and made into law, and people keep selling each other out, meaning that we have the right and the left political circle that sells us poor civilians out every chance they can, why should we listen to them anymore? You know, and that's a very dangerous place to be, because that's when you start seeing society start to break down. And I think we're there, or getting close to it. You're seeing criminals go in and smash and grab in larger cities, not so much the smaller ones. The smaller ones, I don't believe this type of thing would ever be a thing, because there's enough people here that are just crazed enough to actually want to defend their rights and their life and their property. In the larger cities, you guys keep voting for the same type of stuff, and you kind of get what you get, because we warned you. You know, these encroachments that they want to do to you, especially with the 2A, they don't just stop at the 2A. You've seen time and time again that it comes out that these guys have actually been censoring media. You know, that's a problem. That's a First Amendment problem. They had no problem shutting down the world and keeping you from exercising your First Amendment. And I think that it would have got a lot heavier-handed had they not had the Second Amendment there that says, hey, you do this enough and people are going to start standing up and fighting back. I mean, there are not enough ATF agents to enforce this type of law. But what they're going to do is, if a gun gets used in a crime and you magically sold it to someone who you did the background check for, you know, it doesn't really matter, because selling a gun has never been illegal until recently. In the United States, in our history, it's never been a thing. And now if you sell a gun just because you didn't need it, you didn't want it, you didn't like it, whatever reason it is, because it's a piece of property, the federal government can now do you up with charges. You're now a felon. All because you decided you didn't want something anymore. Maybe you got rid of it at a swap meet. Maybe you did do something at a gun show, a private sale, private to private. There's nothing on books, so there's nothing that they can actually try to enforce until they take that gun and find it in a crime scene. Then they're going to trace it to the last place that sold it. The last place that put an FFL out had to put it in the system somewhere. And that's how they trace where a gun came from, so they can kind of figure out the chain of events that led to the crime. Well, now you're liable for it. You have been to some degree to this point, but now you're liable for going to jail for this. Like, they can actually file charges against you. The ATF is going to say, oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're not using this to go look for criminals. We're just going to use it on criminals that we find, or have to deal with right now. Well, when have you ever known the federal government or the government in general to keep 100% of their word? You haven't. And I think that more and more we see this type of thing pop up, the more you see people check out and kind of decide that they're done listening. You could only be doing what you think is right for so long before they keep telling you that everything you've done correct and legally up to that point is illegal. Look for a crime and they'll find it. That's the problem with this type of mentality that our federal government, specifically their enforcement agencies, are looking for, is they're enabling something that can be used, if not now, which I believe it is being used now, in the future, that could be used to great detriment to every human being in the United States. The more we dull our younger generations to their rights, the longer we delay them from learning their rights, the easier it is for the state to come after them and take them. So what are you doing to remind your kids and the future generations what it means to be an American? What your rights are? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And just because you think that giving up your rights might help crime, that isn't supported by history. Think about it. Would you shoot the goat that saw the cow killed by the coyotes? No. That's kind of what they're doing, isn't it? This doesn't make a lot of sense. But our government's not making a lot of sense and hasn't for a long time, at least for people like me that have been watching them do this type of stuff. So that's my 2 cents for this stuff that's going around. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.